What are the best case scenarios and what are the worst case scenarios? I'm going to talk about that on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. You can find me at Jeremiah Geiger2 over on X. And thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And joining me on the show today is the great Shaun Barrett. Shaun, how are we doing, brother?
The word great there is doing a lot of heavy lifting, isn't it? I'm doing well, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me on. Congrats on the job as well, obviously taking over from Pete, who obviously I know well. And so far, you've done a great job. I've really enjoyed listening so far.
I appreciate it. It's good to definitely be doing this, and as we're working through this every day now, it's definitely a challenge. But as we get into the season, we're gonna have a lot more content, of course, as I get the right background up on the screen there. So today we're talking about the best case scenarios for the Marlins this season. What is going to be, I guess, the status to determine a successful year for the organization? We're going to talk about what has to go completely wrong to deem this season a complete failure. And I think we both agree that wins and losses aside, there's much more, I guess, in-depth things we got to talk about to determine the good and bad for this team. So really quick, let me know how you feel heading into spring training and what will be the best case scenario as we go into this season.
Yeah, obviously coming into spring now, there's a lot of excitement as a fan. First, always spring for me is a big part of the year for me. I love having baseball back. I wish the UK weather would start to agree that it's spring because it hasn't quite yet. As far as, as you said, wins and losses this year, like ordinarily you'd like to say best case scenarios, should they make the playoffs, or even a winning record. But for me, the wins and the losses don't really matter. Whether or not they win 72 or whether they win 63 really doesn't matter. I think they've clearly shown by their actions that they're looking to get that as many lottery balls in the draft again for after not quite getting what they wanted in the last one. They can go into the lottery a second year, and I think that's probably what they're going to do. So as far as best case scenario is as a fan, I'd like to keep Sandy. That's probably number one, although I'm doubtful that that's going to be the case. So I guess in a way, best case scenario is the trades that we do see return valuable prospects that helped move the team forward into the future as they go to a winning window. And then the players that they've got already, so Arian and Xavier Edwards and Lopez and some of the younger guys coming through, Norby in particular, we start to see them as key parts of this next rebuild as we go through it. So, I don't think wins and losses really matter to me, or they really should to Marlins fans. It's about seeing what we have and seeing what currently on the team is going to be part of the next winning Marlins season, whenever that is, and also any trades that do occur are successful trades. Obviously, we're not going to know that for a few years, probably.
I have to agree with you on that because we have to establish the next, I guess, generation of Marlins players who will be here for hopefully a few years. I know the model that the Marlins are trying to copy isn't necessarily harboring any safe hope in keeping these players long term, but like you said, cornerstone players, who's going to be here? I look at a Connor Norby, Xavier Edwards, and then even further down the line, you look at somebody like Kyle Stowers. Could this be his last shot at playing every day in Miami? Is Jonah Bride, is he for real? Can he translate that success from last year to this year? And then you mentioned the trades. And I think not only the Marlins have to hit on the trades this season, if they do end up trading Sandy Alcantara, but you look back at last season with the Marlins trading Jazz and in the offseason, Berger and Luzardo. Are there any tangible results we see from those trades? How is their development looking like? Because if the player development system improves and we see production from draft picks and prospects, then we're going to feel a lot better going into 2026 and the second half of 25. But if it's June 1st and these prospects, are hitting 220 in high A ball or double A and they're just struggling, then I think the Marlins are definitely going to be in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is key that the word development is so key for the Marlins, because we know that we're going through a rebuild. We know that Sandy's probably going to get traded. So to see one of these key prospects that the Marlins brought back perform well, maybe even touch the majors and have a bit of success there, really will help Marlins fans feel a little bit better about what's going on. As you said, if they look like they're starting to struggle or they're flaming out, all of a sudden you're wondering, well, if we trade Sandy and get some high minor league prospects, how can we trust that the Marlins are going to do the right job in developing them? So seeing a few of these guys actually develop and perform really would make me feel a lot more comfortable about the direction that the Marlins are currently taking.
Are there a couple names for you, Shaun, that stand out in terms of you want to see these players start off the year on the right foot and kind of prove themselves to the organization?
Absolutely. So obviously, number one for me is Augustin Ramirez. Is he a catcher? Is he not a catcher? I think if he's not going to be a catcher, then the Marlins really need that bat to come alive. We need to see that power come through, because the difference between being a catcher and being a first base DH player, like as far as value goes, is massive. So if he is going to be a defensive liability or a DH player, all of a sudden you're expecting 35, 40 home runs for what the Marlins have traded away to achieve. And then De Los Santos as well, obviously last year led all of the minor leagues in power. So to see that translate into the majors at a certain degree, we know that the chase rate is going to be an issue. We know that there's going to be a lot of swing and miss stuff. We're already going to see that with Conine at the major league level as well. I don't think that's ever going to go too far away. I'm never expecting him to have a sub 20K percentage, but somewhere between 25, below 30 at least.
Yeah.
Top, all of a sudden that plays at the major league level. I think one thing that's very key for both of these players is they're still very young. De Los Santos is 21, Ramirez is 23, which for a catcher, if he is a catcher, is still very young. Whenever you're talking about catcher, you want to take 3 or 4 years off that age as far as expecting development. I wouldn't expect him, if he's going to be a catcher really at the major league level, probably not till late next year. If we see him earlier and the Marlins see that the bat is actually developing way above that defense, we might see him at the end of this year.
He's definitely a bat first profile, but if he can somehow make it as a major league catcher, because there's a lot of doubt surrounding him at the moment, then that's a huge jump for the organization, because then they have Ramirez, they have a depth guy, Joe Mack, who's knocking on the door soon. And you mentioned De Los Santos, which he might be the biggest wild card for the organization, because if he does, and it's a big if, cut down the chase rate, which was atrocious last season. I know he's the home run king of the minor leagues, but major league pitching is going to carve him up if he doesn't fix that. But if he does, then suddenly the Marlins have 2 above average, very impactful players that, I always use the term, accelerate the rebuild. And at this point, that's what they have to do. In the next segment, we're going to be talking about the worst case scenario for the Marlins this year. Wins and losses aside, what can absolutely, what has to be avoided at all costs for this team? That's going to be coming up right after this. Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein that's with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer. You can enjoy the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether you're snacking at your desk, on a road trip, or you just need a quick protein boost, they're always a go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein. It offers 9 essential amino acids and it packs a protein punch. Grab the no-shells pistachios for that grab and go ease. And if you like the satisfying crack of opening each shell, it's like snack meditation. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios is a snack that works as hard as you do. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. We're back here with the UK GOAT. Shaun Barrett is in the house, and we are getting into the worst case scenarios. Make sure you like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know your thoughts, Marlins fans. What is your worst case scenario if you're a Marlins fan? And Shaun, I'm going to get yours in a minute, but first, I just want to say the one thing that I can't see happen with this team is they're already in a bad position with the draft, getting the 7th pick, and I know they're going for the lottery, but injury. They have to avoid the injury bug again. You can't have another season where you're setting records essentially for players used in a single season. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. What about you?
Yeah, I think the one word that I really don't want to see is setback, and that's talking about Erie. Like his recovery is kind of like he is going to be the linchpin of this next movement as the team go forward. His return is going to be somewhat around the time that the Marlins actually might end up trading Sandy. So all of a sudden, we've got this young phenom of a pitcher who's going to be the clear ace of the team. I'd hope that someone steps up in the rotation this year, but I don't think anyone can be anywhere near his talent. So, yeah, the word setback to me just scares me. I just want to see him back on the mound like we're seeing now with Sandy, obviously in spring training. From what we've seen so far, which is not much, looks good. Obviously, all the news that we're hearing from people around the team are going to be super positive because, of course, they are. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, he looks rubbish. Oh, by the way, who wants him in June, July? So the bits we've seen are encouraging. The velo being back there is absolutely massive. And just seeing him back on the mound is so important to the team. And that will be the same for the rebuild for Erie as well. So the worst case scenario for me is seeing setback and knowing that if we don't see him again this year, then we're talking about next year coming back, and then he's got to ramp up. He's not going to come back and immediately throw 120, 150 innings. They're going to have to build him up, and that's going to take 18 months to 2 years. So getting him back on the mound right now or as soon as possible, probably after the All-Star break, is key for the organization.
And I think another thing too, excellent points with Yuri, because he does have some of the best stuff that we've seen a Marlins pitcher really since Jose Fernandez back in the day. So accelerating not even accelerating, but having his development and progression be consistent, especially coming off a surgery like that, is huge. What's also huge definitely has to be the impact of the everyday players. I think you want to see that continued development every day. We look at a Connor Norby, who Peter Bendick says, I think he can be an all-star. And that's really high praise, and that's setting the bar very high for him. But he's only played half a season in the major leagues. So seeing what he brings in a 162-game season, especially playing third base, which isn't his natural position, you could argue, that's huge. What do you have with Xavier Edwards and him defensively? We know the bat's there. What can he do for an encore? But is he going to stick at shortstop? And then it goes back to the pitching staff. I think they're so talented. You look at across the board, Ryan Weathers, we've seen spurts of greatness going back to last season. In the first half, he was pitching himself into the all-star conversation. But the big two wild cards for me this year, and I think would be a really bad scenario for the Marlins, is if Max Meyer and Edward Cabrera, the door closes on them as starting pitchers. I think this really is their last shot with a new pitching coach and a new development plan to establish themselves as consistent starters. I mean, Cabrera has the command control, the command issues, and Max Meyer is just been inconsistent. So if they can't put it together in the major leagues, it might be time to just close the door on that experiment,
Yeah, I think they'll have every opportunity over this year and probably next year as well, just because of the cost point. It is so low for the Marlins through this rebuild. So ultimately the Marlins at this point just need innings until some of the higher level prospects that they've got, and there are a few on the mound, and obviously we know what the Marlins have done previously, developing pitchers. Obviously Mel's gone, but I think that the core of that team will still very much be there. For me, I'm not sure whether it's their last chance, but I think it might be their last chance to be trusted as key pieces of this rebuild. When the Marlins are looking to next win, have a winning record in a season, whether that be 26 or 27, like, are they going to be trusted as your number 2, your number 3 behind Urey? This is their audition for that almost. So I think, to a certain point, it is kind of the last chance to prove that they can be trusted. And if they don't deliver, if they do struggle, they probably will pitch in the rotation next year for the Marlins. But it will be a case of, we know these are guys that we need to replace.
Right. It's not a long-term fixture or, I guess, projection for the next 3 to 4 years. They're just placeholders, essentially. Yeah. And also, I look at the farm system depth, and I think the farm has been as deep as it's been in a few years. You look at the breakdown, all the trades, and now a new international free agency class, but there is still a question on, do they have high-end talent, enough high-end talent? I don't see it. I don't see that one can't miss prospect, and they're rare to come by. But I think this season as an organization would be a failure if at least 2 or 3 of those guys can't come up and immediately, make some waves. You can't have every single guy come up and have a slow start, and suddenly you're kind of questioning their long-term, I guess, piece to the organization in the future. They're fixtures here, because I think of somebody like a Jared Cerna, who I love as a prospect. I think he can possibly debut this season, or a Robbie Snelling, who very well could debut. If they come up and struggle and the development is kind of taking a step back, then you're going to be heading into 26, still understanding that they're young and not ready to give up, but you're not going to feel as confident as you do this time right now, because this is the time of the year, spring training, when everybody's hopeful. So I think that's another, I guess, part of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a case of there's got to be 1 or 2 of these guys in the minor leagues as they're building up. They have built up the depth, as you said, of the minor league prospect. That core blue chip number 1 prospect that the Marlins are crying out for, like, that's something that they need to acquire in the trade if they do trade Sandy. But yeah, you're right. These guys, Cerner is a good guy to sort of mention, because he might not be your batting number 4, your power hitting top best player, but he needs to. They need a few everyday players from this collection of prospects for this rebuild. You can't just hope that you keep hoping that these guys materialize into studs. They're not. Every now and then you need 1 or 2 prospects kind of coming out of nowhere. Cerner's not this huge top prospect, is he? But if he develops well enough to the point where you can go, actually, we can trust him to be an everyday starter. The Marlins, through many rebuilds, have struggled to just get that. I look back at BA. We were the pay BA situation. Yeah. We were hoping for him to be the batting 4th, hitting 100 RBI, 30 home runs, whatever stat you want to mention. He struggled, certainly, to some degree, just to be an everyday player at sometimes. So, yeah, there are some unheralded guys that the Marlins need to develop into just being okay at the major league level. A winning team isn't built with 9 bats that all are raking all the time. You need those guys that can just perform through a season at an average clip.
One of the players who they have on the current roster, and somebody who's been, I guess, the most consistent player on the 40-man roster still, arguably, and is still here, is Jesus Sanchez. We're going to talk about him, and is he moving to center field? What are they doing here? That is going to be coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. They shop, you save. Make sure you take us everywhere you go. Locked On Marlins is available on Apple, Spotify, and of course the YouTube channel if you're watching. So thank you for making us a part of your day, your first listen of the day. And Shaun, we are talking about Jesus Sanchez in this segment. A kind of a polarizing player, I think. Somebody that Marlins fans were debating, should he even be on the roster just a couple years ago? Was he a DFA candidate because the struggles were so much? And then he played his way into an everyday role, starting just shy under 150 games he played in last year. And he's really the last guy left, the veteran of the group. Everybody else is coming over via trade or the minor leagues. But Clayton McCullough says that Jesus Sanchez is going to be getting reps in center field. Is this something that the Marlins are taking seriously as they head into the new season?
I think to a certain degree, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I don't think Jesus Sanchez is going to see a lot of time at centre field. I think it is a case of let's see some reps from him. Let's give him an opportunity because he probably will play a little bit at centre field through the season. The Marlins have some depth in the sense of they've got a lot of names on a list that they need to whittle down for the outfield. But having Jesus Sanchez prepare in spring for a worst case scenario for him having to play there. Obviously, I think Dane is probably penciled in and probably will soon get inked in as the everyday centre fielder as we go through spring. But Jesus Sanchez might see some opportunity. He played in 2022 in centre field quite a bit and was fine, like almost league average. I think it was -2 outs above average is one of the stats I see, but most of them are around sort of 0 and 1 and -1. He's okay as a centre fielder. I don't think the Marlins will be playing him there a lot. I think they'll be more interested in seeing his bat perform rather than the defense. He's not a defensive prowess player. Having that flexibility is not only helpful for the Marlins, but at a certain point you've got to wonder, is he a trade candidate? If he has a good season, he had almost a quiet near 2020 season last year, which is quite strange for him. He's not known for his speed previously. The new rules presumably helped him steal a bag or two. I think he is probably what we were just talking about. He is a perfectly average player. He's got a career 99 WRC plus. He got hot till beginning near the end of the season and was trickling over to 100 and 101 for this career. So he is literally an average baseball player. And if he does get hot at the trade deadline, a team needing a bit of pop or a bit of depth in the outfield, he could be a trade candidate. He could be a guy that returns not quite a bit, but a top 100 prospect potentially. He's cheap for now, and for most teams he is cheap anyway. But he's starting to go through arbitration. This is his ARB2 season. So this is kind of, as a team going through a rebuild, this is kind of the year where they probably will move on from him. And he's a player that's improved bit by bit. Probably not as quickly as Marlins would have liked or us as fans would. But at this point now, any team trading for him knows that they're getting an everyday player. He's not a star player. He's not too flashy. But he'll go in and do a job. You can park him in right field and know that you've got a major league player there. So, yeah, I think there's some optimism for him. He has improved every year. That K percentage has come down. He hits the ball miles. His biggest issue for me is he just hits too many ground balls. He needs to get that launch angle up. Clearly, that's easier said than done because they will know that. The Marlins know that. But it's putting it into practice and making an adjustment. If he can make that adjustment, the sky's the limit. You could be talking 35, 40 home runs.
Oh, I mean, we think back to just a couple years ago, that game against Colorado. He's hitting the ball to the triple deck right off that little Coors Light sign right up there, and it's 500 feet. And you're like, where this power's there. The raw power is there. Can he translate it consistently? And we saw that last year. It was like, I believe he finished with 18 home runs. He was right at that 20 home run mark. And you say, man, he could hit 30 if he starts hitting lefties a little bit better. And if he, like you said, the ground ball rate, his player profile, he's got to get the ball in the air more. And we see, again, those spurts of it. Center field, though, I remember 3 years ago, 2022, I believe, you said it, when he's getting time out there, and it was just a disaster. It wasn't by the eye test. The advanced metrics could say one thing, but you're seeing him make plays. Like, what are you doing? Like, he's not custom made for center field. And I just think when you have somebody like Dane Myers, who's, chomping at the bit for this extended playing time, I feel like Dane and Jesus are the two locks in the Marlins outfield at this point, and Stowers can play center. I feel like the simple answer is just to not overcomplicate it, put Sanchez in right, maybe sometimes in left if you need, and then just let him hit, because obviously his value is only going to go as far as his bat goes. And as for his trade value, at this point with the Marlins, I think everybody's on the table unless you just got here. If you're not part of the players that they're evaluating, like Connor Norby or Xavier Edwards, if you're a veteran with service time, Sanchez, Jonah Bride even, who's now 29 years old, I think all these guys could possibly be on the move. It just depends, again, on the market. I thought Sanchez could have been traded last year at the deadline. Seattle's a team that needs bats. But to do so, he has to perform, and he does have to tap into that power because he truly is one of those players. It's like, what if he can take that raw power and translate it into the game?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a case where we know that that's the profile. If you look at his ground ball, line drive, fly ball rate, it's similar to an Otto Lopez or an Xavier Edwards. And these are speedy contact guys that haven't got much power. They want to keep the ball on the ground. They want to take advantage of the BABIP that they can produce with their speed and their contact rates. Jesus Sanchez is not that guy. He is a power hitting corner outfield. He should be putting the ball in the air a lot more. A 50% plus ground ball rate for a player of his profile is just crazy. And as you said, the left-handed pitching issues that he's had throughout his whole career, at this point at 27, 28 years old, which will turn this year, like, can we expect much change? Is he now the player that he is always going to be? There's a little bit of growth potential there, but not an awful lot.
And of course, he's the only player to ever walk and then be called out. That the debacle down last year at Lone Depot Park. So he's a funny player. He's somebody I root for, and in a season like this, you want, as a fan, the fan part of you understand the business, but you do see the players who not necessarily are going to make all-star teams or get MVP votes. But Sanchez is fun. He's a fun player to watch, and I'm definitely rooting for him. He reminds me of De La Cruz, just that laughable, funny guy who brings the energy to the ballpark. And for a fan, you have that emotional connection to someone who's been here for a while, and you see all these trades. If Sanchez ends up leaving the Marlins this season, or maybe he stays, I'm definitely going to miss him because I like seeing him play every day, even when the results are bad. He just has that demeanor to him,
Yeah, he adds a bit of excitement. He adds a bit of interest when you're watching, especially in the UK when it's so late. Having something that you can chuckle at and have a bit of fun with is always good. And obviously, him and De La Cruz were thick as thieves. It almost reminded me, this might be going too far back for you, but of Logan Morrison and Brian Peterson. They were two outfielders that had an awful lot of fun, probably about over a decade ago now. But that kind of relationship that they had reminded me of that.
Definitely. Well, Shaun, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on the podcast, and I'm sure we're going to have you a lot more on here as the season progresses. We're just a few days away from Grapefruit League action starting. So thank you again, Shaun.
No, I appreciate it. And as I said before, congratulations. Enjoyed your work so far. And obviously, we've crossed paths on your previous work as well. So, yeah, I'm always happy to join you and talk Marlins baseball.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked on Marlins. Make sure you subscribe, share the pod with other Marlins fans who may not have heard about it. And until then, stay safe. Let's go fish.